Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of May 13th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and sponsored by Purolator, Canada's shipping company for courier and freight. Learn more at purolator.com. In this episode, an exclusive interview with Whole Foods former Co-CEO Walter Robb in advance of our discussion together on the main stage at Store 2019 coming up May 29 in Toronto. We talk about his personal journey to retail leadership, perspectives on the growth and evolution of food trends, and the origins and power of sustainability and organic. Then part two of my feature interview with Rob Shields, veteran retailer and retail loyalty visionary, as we talk about the past, present, and future in the retail loyalty space, as Rob tells us that over time, some things become true no matter when you ask it. We also talk about removing friction of loyalty with his new venture, Paymi. Last but not least, I'll cover off the top retail news of the week, including home hardware sticking to its strengths, the grocery battle for Victoria Day, Walmart crushes earnings with the best Q1 comps in almost a decade, Whole Foods tests a new format, Canadian Tire talks about global expansion via Helly Hansen, Chicos weighs a buyout, Sobeys says Voila, and calling all drones in aisle 5. But first, let's listen into my interview with Walter Robb.
Walter, welcome to the Voice of Retail. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're just flying in, and you will soon be in Toronto. And I have the pleasure of, after you give your presentation on May 29th at Store 2019, we'll do some chit and chatting on the stage. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to have a discussion, a bit of background. So let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I read on Wikipedia, so that must be true, that you were the captain of the Stanford soccer team, and you moved from there to growing almonds, and then the rest of your career. But tell us a little about yourself and how you came to Whole Foods and what you did there.
Yeah, all that suggests it wasn't very well planned out, doesn't it? But let me say first that I'm excited to come back to Canada. I helped open up Canada for Whole Foods and become a big fan of the country and particularly the Canadian culture. Looked a lot at the differences between the two countries, but always so appreciated the real focus on community in Canada that seems to be shared in your consciences. And Toronto always found to be one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world, and as in the way that everyone gets along and works together. To me, there's a lot to be learned there for some of the struggles we're facing in our own country. But so I appreciate the invite and the chance to come and talk a little shop up there with all the retailers in Canada. And as far as my background, you got some of it, but it was, it's just generally trying to find something that I really, really wanted to do. I wanted to do something that was going to try to impact the world. So I bounced around. I wrote a book after Stanford. I wrote a book on historical sites. I was a farmer for a year, as you mentioned, but not so successful. I think turned out I was better at selling food than growing it, although I am a big organic gardener. And I tried a number of things until I started a little natural fit store in 1978, 1,000 square foot on a loan of $10,000 from my stepfather. And, from there it just kind of evolved. We were in step with the times around the interest in natural food that was really just beginning at that time, kind of from our generation. And from there, as you know, it sold my store to John and Mackey in 1989. That was store number 12 for Whole Foods. And then we went and built it out until we sold to Amazon in the summer of 2017.
Yeah, I want to get back to the what I call the chicken and egg question about the growth and really the tremendous growth in organic. But before I get there, how did you come to your principles around food? These concepts of sustainability, accountability, organic that Whole Foods really is known for. That's kind of common parlance or discussions today, but it wasn't so much so 20 plus years ago. How did you arrive at that to begin with?
Yeah, right. It's a very good question because people forget just how fringe all of this was. And I suspect like many social movements or many movements in history, things start small or start on the fringe and then they make their way to the mainstream. And there wasn't the language, the intellectual framework that we have today about this, or even the connections with. But what there was a desire in our generation, in our group in particular, to bring, as we looked at the rise of frozen foods in the 50s, and we looked at the rise of processed foods, I think that came out of the World War II, post-World War II industrial agriculture production system, was kind of our way of pushing back and saying, no, we want to do whole foods. We want to do, I meant with a small W, foods that are as whole or complete or as connected as possible to their natural state or as whole as possible are the most life-giving to individuals and to communities. And so starting from that place, for me personally, it was a matter of reading Wendell Berry, Francis Moore Lepay, Robert Rodale, and also messing around and experimenting. I've started making my own bread and cooking and learning a little bit about how this all worked. But I remember cooking my first pot of rice and then and then fresh bread and then just tasting it and going, wow, there's really a difference here. And it just hooked me. So as I was trying to formulate, the steps to take, I just said, well, I'm going to go in this direction. It wasn't that I was raised a grocer or anything. It was just that this looked like something I could do that would really seemed like I could make a contribution, and it seemed like something that felt really right. So you're right. There were not those sorts of words. It was more, I think, around a sense of like, we're going to bring this healthier food to the world. And in fact, Whole Foods started on that principle and also on the idea of building a company based on love and respect.
Listening to your journey, I reflect on how many times I hear it, and it's the case for myself that you didn't, purposely start out to be in retail. It's amazing how many retailers and visionaries wind up leading amazing retailing companies, but didn't start their journey in retail and probably didn't even think they'd be a retailer. And it sounds, it's interesting. Everyone's journey seems to kind of coalesce and, wind up in the same place. And it's interesting.
But really, is there anything more noble than retail? I mean, it's essentially, you're right. Was it intentional? No. But is there anything more noble than retail in terms, because you're basically in the business of serving the customer and serving other people, particularly if you're serving, in my case, something you really believe in. And I think also this idea that somehow that, retail is at the, it's the heart of any economy, is this direct customer connection. And I don't think it gets the credit it deserves in terms of job creation, job opportunity, career growth. And so I'm very proud to be a card-carrying retailer. I'm very proud of, what it represents, which is that, individual connection between the retailer and the customer. And us retailers, when we forget that, we lose ourselves. But when we remember that all of it comes down to that individual connection and communication, we can really find and realize the real promise of retail. Because human beings they want connection and community, and they, in ways you can't get online, and now online is certainly a part of retail and serving a customer, but remembering that physical store experience is so important to human beings, and they want to be around people, they want to connect with people, they want to feel that spontaneity that comes from that. And I think retail is uniquely positioned to deliver on that, as well as serving other people.
Well, there's no question. I think the retailers that are cognizant or recognize that you can't out-efficiency online retail, but you sure can develop a store experience that is, as you say, very personal and cultural and social and all those things wrapped up. Let's talk about, when we talk about customers, let's talk about organic and really organic foods in the grocery store is part of the mainstream now, but it wasn't always so. And you've touched on it a little bit. I'm curious of your thoughts. I called it the chicken and the egg. Was the demand created by forward-thinking people like yourself, or was there a pent-up appetite for just better food, more consciousness around food coming out of, as you said, the 50s and the mass production? What's your feeling on that?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the 1920s, there was a USDA agricultural economist named Sir Albert Howard who first articulated some of the principles of organic farming. And so it's not a new word, okay? It's a word that's been around, and his proposition was, if you read his paper, was the great connectivity between the soil, the health, the cell of people, and the health of the food, the community, the health, the soil. And he drew a circle of life that kind of represented that. And so Robert Rodale in the 40s published the first edition of Organic Gardening magazine, and he started some field trials and started talking about the principles of building soil and what that could be. But it didn't, he lost money for 10 years with that magazine. And I started reading it in the early 60s, but not really, just trying to pick it up. And I think you have to remember, we didn't even have the first state organic law until 1990, and the federal law did not actually pass until the year 2000. I don't know what the history is in Canada, but what happened, and what happened along that journey was things, as I recall, was certainly we did our part to contribute and continue. When it started, it was a very, very small percentage of things. Even today, it's only 5% of food sales, and it's less than 1% of land acreage in the United States. So it still has a long ways to go. But the demand is double digit and has been compounded for the last 5 years. So there's clearly an opportunity gap there. But I think that, the thought was, I don't know if you remember in the 80s or 90s, the Alar crisis hit. And that was when people discovered all pesticides were being sprayed on apples, and it hit 60 minutes. And so what happened, there was like overnight, the demand for organic apples went through the roof. And so I think as I look back on it, was a combination of our just continued chopping wood, but these various things that happened where people became aware of how food was being produced in ways they hadn't asked questions. And that led to the real birth of organics. And then, as we say, once we put the organic seal in place with the federal program, which was, a 10-year effort to do, it really created a marketplace that had rules and guide rails that allowed the market at the year 2000, the market just took off. And it's now some 60 or 70 billion strong as a result of having that clear regulatory framework. And of course, we enjoy reciprocity with Canada as well, so that the two countries reckon each other's standards. But it started very humbly. It started with just a few products. It started in kind of a very, simple way, but it's based on principles that have been around for a long time.
Well, it's interesting, picking up on your thinking around how organic evolved with both a regulatory framework and then also important, so many different definitions of organic, and that word can be played with a little too much perhaps. But this, a sign or a symbol or something that people can count on, that there's an authority or a body out there saying this is authentically organic. I think that was a big milestone in the industry, I'm sure.
Well, because remember that the seal requires a third-party verification of the standards, and I think that gave the customer confidence, and it developed the seal, which is on the packages and the products, and gave the customer confidence. This is something that can listen. Not all people agree with that. There's many people still think it's just a marketing scheme. Yeah. But if you've ever had your hands in the soil and you've ever, farmed organically or gardened organically, you understand there's a difference when the soil is healthy like that. I mean, we are losing about 5 pounds of soil for every pound of food we grow in the United States today, and with the cultivation practices, and so building and rebuilding soil, not to mention carbon sequestration that happens when you properly take care of the soil. There's a whole another generation of reasons, or generation of people to rediscover why this can be a real contribution to healthy food and a healthier planet going forward.
Well, let's in the last couple of minutes we have left. Again, you've been so generous with your time. Give us a hint. What's your prognosis for retail? Give us a sense of what you'll be sharing with retailers here in Toronto in a couple of weeks on stage.
Yeah. Well, what we really need to talk about is make sure folks see clearly this inflection point that we're at. That I don't think you just go out and do what I did 40 years ago and just put up a little store and away you go. It's just the marketplace has changed in terms of the generation, in terms of the technology and data, in terms of what the customers expect and how they expect to be served. And so I think it starts with people seeing clearly where are we and what is happening and what is going on right now. So, we talk about the physical and the digital and everything in between. We talk about how the go-to-market has changed because you can go to market directly with the customer today and build a very nice business without going through a physical store, although interestingly, most of those companies have come around to the realization that you do need a physical store. So it's really about thinking about the integration of those two going forward and how your strategies are there. But again, the laser focus on the customer we see from Amazon, I see personally, their incredible intensity of focus on the customer and serving what they need, which is really always good practice in any marketplace. But I guess I'll just be encouraging them to see things clearly, to think strategically about how to make their way forward with their particular strengths and offer in the market, and to and offer some encouraging words about, I think, what remains the positive future for retail.
Well, we talked about a pent-up demand for organic food. I think I'm sensing a pent-up demand for seeing you on the stage, so everyone is really excited. Looking forward to it. So, and I'm so much looking forward to having the opportunity to chat with you live on the stage as well. So that is here in Toronto on May 29th, coming up at Store 2019. Walter, thanks so much for joining me on The Voice of Retail, and I look forward to meeting you in person in a couple of weeks.
Thanks so much, Michael. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
We'll be right back.
This is Steve Dennis. After more than a 20-year career as a senior executive at brands like Neiman Marcus, I'm now a consultant, speaker, and Forbes contributing writer on what it takes to reinvent retail in the age of digital disruption. And the good news is that physical retail isn't dead. The bad news is that boring retail most certainly is. So I hope you'll join me at Store 2019 to hear my unique take on the state of modern retail. As the lines between digital and physical blur, and as consumer preferences evolve, retailers need to reimagine their customer experience, often radically. In my keynote, you'll discover what brands around the world are doing to transform their business to be more remarkable, and you'll learn 8 killer strategies so you don't wind up stuck in the boring middle. That's Store 2019, May 28th and 29th in Toronto. Learn more and get your tickets now at storeconference.ca.
Let's jump into the second part of my conversation with retail and loyalty veteran Robb Shields. Picking up where we left off from last episode, Robb shares insights with us from being one of the top retail CMOs in the country through to the creation of an open source loyalty program and beyond. Let's listen in.
The advent of multi-screening while you're living in your home. I mean, we were spending millions of dollars in TV production and media, and the question always, which half of your marketing budget is a waste? well, actually, you say, if I could connect, this 30-second spot to, the behavior of somebody, if it's influenced them, it's created some intent, and follow them, through that path to purchase, that would be amazing, because then I could actually validate the spend in mass media, and I was encouraged to do. I wanted to do that. So
and in fact, you could drive attribution, right? Which is the
right. So
one of the secret sauces.
Yeah. So we started to noodle, how do I get somebody who's sitting there, with their iPad and watching TV at the same time, but if my 30-second spot is compelling enough, it might actually say, hey, I'm going to look that up right now. But so I could, you could triangulate the data, the time of day, and some other things like a website visit. And okay, maybe still pretty loose though. Now there's emerging technologies through, inaudible sounds and inaudible frequency to link, TV to other devices and have a full data experience, if you will, right through. And I think the other important part is you have to contextualize it as you go. So you can't have someone leave an environment and then re-enter an environment and start all over again. You've got to carry the experience through all channels and all experiences. And so the challenge, I don't think, is so much the kind of the technical data side of it. It's how do you present a customer experience? Because look, by now, most consumers, especially in Canada, are saying, you got it. You've got my data. I welcome the opportunity to give me relevant, meaningful interactions with you and your brand, but don't make me kind of create new steps every single time. So contextualize it, learn about me, and make things either easier, simpler, faster, more relevant, more meaningful, or all of the above. And you got me. So I think that's the major challenge today. Less so, I call it CRM, but it's mostly the data journey and the customer experience intermixing so that, regardless of where I am, how I'm engaging, what I'm thinking about. And of course, this is all nonlinear, Mike. No consumer goes in a straight line. So you have to loop back. You've got to go side to side, and you've got to go forward. So that, I think, is the major challenge for CMOs today, is looking at the entire customer journey, which imposes a little bit of a question around, the way retail is organized from a structural standpoint, because a marketer now could say, well, I want to venture into the stores now. I want to follow the customer through a mobile app. And yet if he or she is in the store, I need to interact with the store operations people to make sure that experience, continues. So it's very interesting when you start to look at, and I've done some work in past years around reorganizing retail around the customer, being customer centric as opposed to being functionally led, which is more traditional. So both lateral, horizontal, and vertical thinking, I think the CMO needs to undertake, and certainly embrace data. I think if you're only focused on, say, non-digital and non-data marketing assets, I think that would be at your peril.
Let's talk about. I'm intrigued by this idea of your open source loyalty program, Paymi. So let's talk about that. Tell me all about how that came to pass and what exactly that is. I mean, it's clearly something where you've leveraged decades of experience in the space. So tell us all about it.
Sure. Well, over the course of the years, some things that have become true, no matter when you ask it on the consumer side, the number one thing consumers want out of any of the programs that we would talk about is cash. Now, most have kind of said, well, that, is expensive, or it sounds like it would be transparent, because you got to remember the business model of loyalty involved managing the liability and points and things like breakage. So
we used to call the Zellers the Italian lira of the loyalty points program, right? You get
exactly
100,000 points would get you a free popsicle at your local Zeller store.
Right. And there's good reasons for, why it would be designed in a way like that. 100 equals 1, or, you have to transfer it, or you have to change it. And most recently, you've seen some attempts in the market to expire points and things like that. So the fatigue around the whole loyalty model has changed. And while consumers have always said, I want cash back, why can't you just give me cash back? That started, us thinking about a way in which, consumers could earn, if they earn $1, you get to keep $1. So, the merchants or the retailers often pay into these programs and systems, but if you look at actually what the consumer gets on the other end, it's not exactly the same amount as the retailers put in. So we started thinking about, well, what if we've designed a program that if a merchant rewards a customer with $1, the customer actually gets $1. And that was the beginning of it. And then we thought, well, and also, why wouldn't we try and take the friction out of the market, where if you no matter how you behave at point of sale, you have to pay for something. And so increasingly using credit and debit cards as payment devices, if you just continue to use those debit and credit cards, and get rewarded for using those, regardless of the cards themselves. And you don't have to present anything else, no coupon, no code, no other card. That would take a lot of friction out and a lot of expense out at the retailer side, because they don't have to do anything as long as they're accepting debit and credit cards. And the third leg, Mike, was to actually deliver back to the merchants the data. In some cases, the data is not as available as you would think on the retail side, unless it's a proprietary program. So we said, well, if you we use the word democratize the data and allowed merchants to actually go in and use the data in an anonymized, aggregated way, that would be a very powerful thing. So basically, the program that we designed, Canadians can link their debit and credit cards to Paymi. Paymi then reaches out to interested merchants to put offers onto the platform. And when members shop with those merchants, they earn cash back right into their Paymi account. And when they want to redeem it, it's an email money transfer right into their bank account, cash for cash. So at the center of all that is this idea that, that data is available in the marketplace. Members know that. And, we're very upfront about the utilization of that data. We need that data to make sure that you did shop with our merchant partners, but the data is also being used for targeting purposes. So, if someone is, a heavy DIYer, today, Lowe's is one of our partners. Lowe's can go into the platform and actually target those individuals who are spending in DIY or spending in adjacent categories that are leading indicator for DIY, and make them an offer. And it's variable in the sense that you don't have to target everybody. You can offer whatever you want in terms of cashback rewards. It can range from 1% to 15%. And all you have to do as a member is, shop with the merchant, and you get your cash. So we've taken a lot of what, either was desired in the marketplace, but somewhat underdelivered, and or some of the friction and barriers that have been put in front of either members or retailers, and remove them. And, we went live in November of last year. We have some fantastic partners, not only in retail and banking, but travel and otherwise. So it's taken off extremely well. We're really proud of ourselves. And, onwards and upwards.
Well, congratulations! It's very unique. As you were describing it, I was trying to think of a program that was like it, and I couldn't really think of anything. So you've really created something unique. Where can consumers? We're all consumers. Where can people find out more about Paymi and sign up?
Well, Paymi.com for sure. That's the single easiest way, either on the web or through mobile. If you're a CIBC cardholder, you can go to your CIBC online banking environment and you could register right from CIBC. They're a strategic partner of ours for their members. But that's not at the any Canadian can join from any financial institution, not just CIBC customers, but they're a partner of ours for online banking and marketing.
Well, let's talk about. Thanks so much. You've been very for joining me. You've been so generous with your time. How do people get in touch with you, Rob, if they have questions or want to pursue some of the thoughts you've had, like the dividends of digital is data? That's a keeper quote, by the way. You're going to hear that more and more. How do they get in touch with you, Rob?
You know what? Probably the best thing to do is just drop me an email at rshields@paymi.com.
Perfect. So listen, I'd love to have you back on the podcast later in the year. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things we didn't get to talk about. I could talk about this space for a while, everything from how loyalty is evolving to premium programs to the future. But there's one thing for certain is that if we have you back on, there'll be lots of interesting things to talk about that happen in the market and see how Paymi's progress. So once again, thanks for joining me, and I wish you have a great week.
You too. Thanks, Mike.
We'll be right back.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Join me at Store 2019. I'll be delivering a keynote titled From a Place to Buy to the Place to Be, how bricks can counter clicks by focusing on selling moments versus simply peddling merchandise. I then lead into an incredible panel discussion with 3 industry titans talking about the reinvention and reimagination of Staples Canada. Joining me is David Boone, the CEO, Joe Jackman from Jackman Reinvents, and Dragon Joe Mimran, who will talk about this incredible story and leave you with actual insights and ideas for your business. Store 2019, we'll see you there.
Thanks to Walter Robb and Rob Shields for being my guest in this episode. So now let's hit the highlights from Retail This Week e-newsletter, biggest retail weekly in Canada. And you can subscribe on retailcouncil.org for free, kind of a companion piece to the Voice of Retail. So put that together each and every week, 51 weeks of the year, curation of the top stories in Canada and around the world. Jumping right into that, we see a great story here from Strategy Magazine talking about the new marketing leadership at Home Hardware. So under Kevin McNabb's new leadership, bringing in a team, refreshing the team, Rob Wallace comes in under as marketing, senior director of marketing. He's bringing in folks in the e-commerce, media, loyalty, and CRM space. In the e-commerce space, I know of Chris Parsons, who's been brought in formerly of Walmart Canada, and Ren's Pets did an amazing job there launching Ren's Pets on a new platform. So great things to come from Home Hardware. From the Globe and Mail, and this was probably a story in many papers covering it, Marina Strauss does a great job. Holt Renfrew closing Edmonton store in increasing crowded luxury fashion market. But, the store alone was a pretty small footprint store, and they have actually, they being Holt Renfrew, closed a number of their smaller footprint stores. I can think of Ottawa, for example, on Spark Street. Really the competition is a larger format footprint allows it to do all kinds of shop-in-shops. And I think as well, I heard that the lease was expiring. So the timing is all right. So no real lessons to take away from this one other than you're going to go bigger than smaller, that's for sure. Jewelry brand APM Monaco kicks off Canadian expansion. This is from Craig Patterson's Retail Insider. They got about 200 stores worldwide, and now they're coming to Canada. Again, we continue to see Canada as a great destination or an attractive destination for international retailers to begin expanding to. MEC, Mountain Equipment Co-op, appoints a new CEO. Philippe Arata, formerly of Best Buy, takes over the Vancouver-based MEC. We've covered in the past couple of episodes their fantastic new store on Queen Street. I was there last week. It's a great store. All the things you'd expect from a new experiential store in the nation's largest market. That from Business of Vancouver. Marks brings well-worn message to everyday Canadians. Fantastic ad. Congratulations to David Louis, who, by the way, is going to be at Store 2019 on a panel talking with Daryl Cook and some other folks about marketing. It's just a fantastic story. This one I love. Jana, I'm looking at her, Jana Buchholz. She wanted to be a fisherman. She wanted to do lobster fishing in New Brunswick, and it was just took her a long time and lots of persistence just to get anyone to allow her to fish. So it's really a fantastic story, so on brand for the Marks Work Well Collective. Really congratulations to David Louis and the entire team there. Moving on to international stories, Walmart, this from Yahoo Finance, Walmart beats on earnings, posts best Q1 comp in 9 years. They've now got a bunch of reasons for this, just a tremendous execution, lots of innovation. We saw their AI store of the future. Of course, one store doesn't make those kind of numbers, but just kind of points you in the right direction. Walmart's e-commerce strategy is really on the growth. I think they grew 37%. They now have 2,450 stores with grocery pickup in the U.S., 1,000 locations with delivery, and by the end of the year, they expect to have 3,100 of its stores for BOPUS and 1,600 of those stores offering delivery. So no question, Walmart in the game for online retail. A new Whole Foods format, this from the Robin Report. Great, insightful review often, not a coincidence from the Robin Report. And this one looks at the new Whole Foods format, which is in Chelsea in Manhattan. It's really interesting to see. It's kind of like they described it basically as Amazon Go without the Go. Not in a pejorative way, but just as a focus and a smaller kind of grab and go assortment, heavy on the beverage. So they quite liked it, actually. So check that out in the Robin Report. And of course, we'll be hearing, you just heard from Walter Robb, former co-CEO of Whole Foods. I'll try and get his insights or his thoughts around that new format while we're up on the stage. Another direct marketer has been sold to this one in Henry's. If you might remember, Dollar Shave Club was sold to Gillette, I think, for just over $1 billion. It looks like Henry's got sold to Schick for $1.37 billion. That's from the New York Times. Wow, right? So it's interesting because you continue to see this trend of bigger corporations deciding that instead of spending a lot of resources on doing something they're not always that great at, which is innovating, they just buy innovation. So here we see it again with Harry's being sold to Schick. A couple of videos to call out. One of them is a great video from BNN from Dean McCann. He's the CFO for Canadian Tire, talking about how they intend to use or could use Helly Hansen, which is a global brand that Canadian Tire bought as a global springboard. So great interview, very insightful to check that out. And yet another great piece of PR promotion prominence for Indochino, my friend Drew Green, in this Bloomberg video. Drew just articulates and is just talking about his results and the connection with his manufacturer and part owners in China. So that's an interesting conversation in the context of what's happening with the tariff tussle in the U.S. And Drew lays it all out and really gives us, goes to school, puts on a clinic of modern retail. So do check that out. That's from Bloomberg. And again, all of these stories and these videos can be linked from a Retail This Week e-newsletter. What else we got? Chicos getting into some trouble. Lots of management shakeup in the past couple of weeks. And now there's a buyout offer on the table from Sycamore Capital, which I believe is the same organization that owns Staples. So they're trying to make a move on Chico, and they're weighing their opportunity, or weighing their options, I guess you could say. In news for retail entrepreneurs, great article from the Globe and Mail on J.J. Wilson, Chip Wilson's son, from Chip from Lululemon, and J.J. Wilson, part of the Kit and Ace, now in the Ride Cycle Club. So he gives a good kind of discussion around what he's learned, lessons learned from Kit and Ace, and how he's taking those forward, and lessons learned basically around the dinner table with his dad and family. Also, a good tour here from Leafly of the new bespoke cannabis store in London, J London. Really great pictures. I visited the Canadian cannabis store in London, very different from the one here pictured. Both have, this one's got wood and polished brass accents, soft gallery lights, and it's kind of a different take. I look forward to visiting that in London as well. Speaking of cannabis stores, Donnelly Group is approved for its first 2 Hobo cannabis stores in Vancouver. There's a little controversy around the name. Not everyone loves that name, and that's to be sure. The Donnelly Group kind of reaches back to the 20s and say it's really about being free-spirited, but it has, I guess, both pejorative and less pejorative meanings. This is from the Georgia Strait. The first Hobo location, by the way, is in Ottawa, so there's one of them already, and I drove by the one of the locations, or the future locations, in Vancouver, so those 2 opening up in downtown Vancouver. Spotlight on grocery retail, moving into the grocery section. Inside the intense high-stakes grocery battle for the best Victoria Meat Day meat sale. This is from the National Post. Great article here. Just talks about how important it is, these milestone weekends, and how, there's always a protein on the plate, and it's a big kickoff, whether you're going to the cottage or getting set. And, it's really, for Canadians, it's across the country, it is a notion of spring. Of course, on the West Coast, spring's been around for a while, but we're certainly waiting for it here on the East Coast, in Toronto and East. So Victoria Day, really, May 2-4 weekend really symbolizes that, and it's a big day, actually, second only to Christmas and Thanksgiving for grocers. Sobeys introduces or unveils, we mentioned this last week, their new service, the new online service. They're going to call it Voila, which is also going to be delivering for IGA. This is powered by the Ocado Group. They're building a couple of massive warehouses in Toronto, Montreal, up to 39,000 products, including fresh produce. Look for that in 2020. Drones in aisle 5. So, article here from the Denver Post talks about, and we've seen this a couple of times, automation in the store, digital transformation. I think these drones that go up and down the aisles and are taking and scanning for misplaced products. And really, interesting, I was at the DXC exhibition place or innovation center in New York in January. I'm talking to one of the vendors there using DXC was working with, and I asked him, why haven't we seen this before? The drones, drone technology is not exactly new. And the short answer was that the power, the AI power, the sophistication of interpreting the data has now got to the point where it's 100%, 99.999 reliable, whereas before it was not always the best data. So you had drones, but they didn't always generate the best data, and I guess that has now reached a tipping point where they also can move through the aisles, but also present great data. Speaking of great data, last but not least, Loblaw's plan for better data-driven experiences. So this from Canadian Grocer, and you really see Loblaw's doubling down, so to speak, not just on delivery. Of course, they've got a lot of that. I've been seeing a lot of marketing for their pickup service, but this is on talking about how they're getting smarter or using their digital insights to power everything from advertising to customer insights. So good luck to them. That's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and be sure and recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. You can also ask your favorite home device, Amazon Echo, Google Home, to play the most recent edition. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc & Company, and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. If you're in Toronto attending Store 2019, and who wouldn't be if you had the opportunity, May 28 and 29, be sure and stop by the Purelator Podcast Studio and share your Store 2019 insights for the Voice of Retail special conference editions. I'll be there for the 2 days. Join me again next week for part 1 of my interview with Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, Senior Director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, frequent commentator on the grocery sector in Canada, and Carl Littler, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at RCC, on key issues for retailers in Canada. Until then, have a great week.